Hello. This is AJT500 slash talented track 98 slash Eloise Wonderwise slash Hilo, and it's time. It's time for the second Illustrious weapon tier list. Now, I know I alluded to doing this back around anniversary, but I kind of wasn't really feeling it. And I'm still kind of in that mood, but I do want to give some updated thoughts. So what I'm going to do this time is, instead of pretty much, before I did a very, very long-winded 2-hour thesis on all the illustrious weapons before, and I do think that was probably worth it, just to get the initial, this is what these actually do and pros and cons and stuff like that out the way. But instead of just remaking that video, as long as it was, I think what I want to do this time is I want to just make an acquisition priority list, which also kind of goes for the tier list in general, but it's just that I'm not going to go through, all the minutia of what every single weapon does and the pros and cons and everything like that. I'm mostly going to go through here and tell you why I think I put it in a certain tier, and what that weapon is useful for, and how much I've seen of that weapon, and the potential of that weapon as of right now. Blase. So this is going to be much shorter than it was before, but I am going to link in the description of this my original weapons tier list for all the illustrious weapons, as well as the video that I did when they got changes. Some of them got changes a couple months ago. Now, when I first made the original tier list, at the time I had only had Hrunting, Andromeda, and Ura. In that time, since last time, I've now gotten a lot more. I've gotten Higurashi, Zosimos, Ereshkigal, and Futsu, and I almost have enough moons right now to get another 2 of them. So I have gotten a lot more experience with the illustrious weapons as opposed to what I had before, and I've also just seen a lot more footage and talks about those weapons since then. The elements have also changed quite a bit since then as well. So some of their priority is higher or lower since then. So pretty much now I've already created the tier list, and I'm going to bring it up. It's on one of these tabs, and I'm just going to go through this and explain why I have certain things in certain spots, and I'm going to touch on a little bit of why they're there, and a little bit on what the weapons do and their pros and cons, but just not as in depth as it was before, because I don't think it's necessary to do the same thing a second time. So we're gonna swap to that tier list now, and we'll go from there. Okay, so this is my tier list. Now, I know some things in here might be a little bit controversial. They might be a little bit controversial, but we're gonna get to that. So starting off in S tier, we have Hrunting and Ereshkigal. Now, I'm gonna start with Hrunting this time. I remember when I made my original tier list, I pretty much established that in my mind I had Earth bias, but I thought that Hrunting was the best weapon at the time. I still think Hrunting is the best weapon as of right now. I think it is the de facto best one. Hrunting is literally an Ellie warping element. Ellie warping weapon. It literally changes how you play Earth in a lot of situations. Now, what I will say is, as opposed to about a year ago, I will say Hrunting, it definitely hasn't fallen off, but there are times where Hrunting is not always the best. Even for stuff like solos, like when you do something like a Hexa or a Fa Zero solo, Andromeda can actually kind of slip into that spot. There are also a significant amount of bursts and full autos that, while they are not necessarily as easily pulled off as just using Hrunting, they are comparable in time and effectiveness to Hrunting. So Hrunting is still the de facto best, but it is still an element warping weapon. So it's still extremely good. Now, the main thing about Hrunting is mostly just the fact that this weapon gives you the guaranteed double strike, and it gives you party wide echo. That's the main thing on it. With this what even gives it to you? This Savage Mythology. This thing, constant double strike is absolutely ridiculous, and it always has been. It's honestly crazy that they gave this to this weapon. It's also a sword, which I mentioned before that a sword is extremely good as a weapon type because there are a lot of accessible sword classes, that still rings true even a year later. Having all these sword classes accessible to Hrunting makes it way more versatile than it should be, to be honest, because you can just play it with so many different things and so many different scenarios that you can use a sword on. Also, the party wide echo is just massive for damage for your party just in general, because every single time you use this weapon, you pretty much always pair it with a Sieg Dagger, which essentially forces the dot damage, so you don't even need to Ogi with this weapon in order to get the dot damage and get the echo on everyone. So while you still may need like a turn for the dot to activate, you would need that regardless if you Ogi. So just in general, Hrunting is really good. It's really good. If you want to upgrade Earth whatsoever, Hrunting is like the first big step. It's crazy because it is, you know, a 150 gold moon weapon, and it does kind of gate Earth in that sense. But honestly, it is literally element warping. Element warping. So Hrunting, de facto best in my opinion, S tier. Now Ereshkigal is still really good. Ereshkigal, it still does have a few of the issues that I mentioned before, where Eresh's biggest thing is it essentially bricks your MC, which is not the greatest, because your MC is a very strong character and a very versatile character. Now granted, it is an axe, so it still does give your MC accessibility to useful classes, but the thing about it is your MC can do so much damage in a lot of instances that Ereshkigal essentially breaking your MC and forcing them to just be an Ogi bot can lower your damage. Essentially what it means is your other characters need to be ridiculously strong to make up, they need to be ridiculously strong and play ridiculously well into this constant double strike from the Ogi to really make up for the fact that you're losing your MC. This also extremely good. The amplified normal attack damage is also really good because it maxes it purely off of this weapon. Now the one thing about this though that we need to talk about is now something that we didn't really have before, is that now we have amplified normal attack special. We have that exists now instead of just the normal amplified normal attack that we had before. So technically, even if you got something like Basara's weapon in Dark, it would still work because those amplifies don't, they work together, but they don't just, you know, they don't overcap is what I'm trying to say. You can have amplified normal attack and amplified normal attack special, and they both buff your damage. So that's this isn't as crazy as it used to be, but it is still really strong. The skill damage cap is also a little bit whack because there are a lot of like skill damage nukes in Dark. It's not super crazy, but it is still something. And also just the reactivation of Ogi. Ereshkigal's biggest issue, and I mentioned this before in the previous video too, but the biggest issue with Ereshkigal is any enemy that you cannot kill before your Ogis start to wear out. Once your Ogis start to wear out, that's where Ereshkigal's biggest weakness comes in, because then you essentially just have to play with an MC that's probably not optimal for the situation, and you can't really play into pretty much everything the weapon wants to do, because the weapon just wants to Ogi and then throw out double strike on everyone. So if you can't kill the enemy in the time before your buffs fall off, now granted you do have stuff like Berserker's S1, you do have stuff like Splitting Spirit, you do have stuff like 000 that can give you extra Ogis on top of this after this wears off, but even then you still are working off of a time limit, and if you can't beat the opponent in that time, this weapon drops off a lot, which is why you, for the most part, don't see it in high level stuff like Hexa or Fall Zero, because unless you're playing in a very special type of room, once this falls off, you might as well just be playing a different class. So Ereshkigal is still very strong though. The thing about Ereshkigal is essentially the quality of life weapon. You can pretty much, I made this joke on a stream once, but pretty much everyone that has Ereshkigal has like a party that has like Valentine Sedala, 6 Bowman, and then it's double Kaguya for that. And you just run that, through events, you run that through anything where you need to farm basic materials, any of that stuff that can be killed with a Resh, even off element, you just bring a Resh to it and just OTK it, essentially, because you just throw out so much damage from the Ogi plus the double strike on everyone plus all the nukes that you can farm a lot of the stuff in the game very effectively that's below M3. And even then, if you're just trying to get like a blue chest or something on like M3 or blue chest in general where dark is at advantage, you can just bring a Ereshkigal and throw like a summon and then just attack and you're good. So Ereshkigal is a very good like farming weapon, and it brings a lot of quality of life for, I would say, dark, but more so your account just in general. It brings a lot of quality of life. So Ereshkigal also deserves S tier. Okay, now moving on to A tier. At the start of A tier, we have Zosimos. Now Zosimos, I remember putting Zosimos a lot lower before, but Zosimos is the dark industry plant. Literally, they planned a lot of current dark stuff around Zosimos. Now the biggest pro of Zosimos is that it's a staff. The biggest pro to Zosimos is that it's a staff. Being a staff, it can immediately play into Mana Diver, which Mana Diver as of right now is the strongest class in the game. It's the strongest class in the game. So if you can be a staff or a dagger, by default, you automatically jump like 2 tiers just because you can play with Mana Diver. Now, Mana Diver also plays into Crest, and not only does it also play into Crest, they pushed a lot of Crest support into Dark, which also plays directly into this weapon because this weapon plays off of Crest. So this weapon has gained a lot of support, and it also got a rebalance. So I'm gonna bring up this because it's the first weapon that we have. But here, the damage cap for the dark damage dealt after normal attacks has been increased on this weapon, and amplifies dark allies' skill damage based on the number of Oblivion Crests. This is also huge because not only does dark have a lot of crest support, but it has a lot of skill damage support, which again plays into Zosimos and just a lot of its characters just in general. So Zosimos, it's very good. It's very, very strong right now. The thing about it is Zosimos and Ereshkigal are literally, they are probably the best Gold Moon weapon combo, I would say, out of the Illustrious weapons. Because if you have both of those weapons, you essentially do not use like another main hand in Dark. Because you just burst with Ereshkigal, and anything that you can't burst with Ereshkigal, you take Mana Diver Zosimos for it. That is pretty much how Dark is played as of right now. There's pretty much nothing that those two don't cover. So if you have both of them, one of them is going to be your main hand pretty much at 90. I usually say 98% of the time because I'm talented track 98, but I'm gonna honestly say 99.9% of the time. If you have both of those weapons, they cover both of your bases. Anything that's high level related to Hexa, Fall Zero, heck, even even solos for those, you bring Zosimos. You bring Zosimos and you run Mana Diver. So it's a crazy weapon that has gotten a lot of support, that plays with a lot of the good characters that are in Dark right now. It's just very strong. Again, also being able to play with the best class in the game. Zosimos, in my opinion, A tier, very, very strong. Very, very strong. Now Futsu. Futsu also did get some changes. So Futsu, 1 turn cut to MC damage skill cooldowns, supplement light ally skill damage. The skill now instead activates when normal attacking to a foe whose Thunder Strike is level 5 or above, reduced from level 7, inflicts debuff resist down stackable upon normal attacks. Now the thing about Futsu is Futsu before I said it was essentially an upgraded Noah Dagger, and to an extent I do still kind of feel like that. I'll be real. I do think this supplement skill damage is really good, and the fact that this activates now on 5 Thunderstruck instead of 7 Thunderstruck is really, really good. But the thing about Futsu's biggest issue now, unironically, and I made a video about this with the impalement weapons, but Futsu's biggest weakness now is that light is very crowded and it's hard to even fit it in. It is definitely more of an upgraded Noah dagger now. I would say they're not even really in the same type of weapon anymore, besides the fact that they both give like this echo, and they're daggers, I guess. But the thing about it is, it's almost hard to fit Futsu into grids because it doesn't bring anything to specifically the crit that light wants to play into, and it doesn't bring anything in the form of, it does have this supplement skill damage, but it doesn't bring anything in the form of the amplify skill damage or anything specifically the Fa Zero key type effects. It doesn't bring anything like that, which means it is a weapon that you want to use as a main hand, but it doesn't play well into your grid, and your grid is so packed that it is hard to fit it in, especially when Noah dagger can immediately alleviate some of your stress because it plays into the crit and does a similar thing in the form of being a dagger and having a similar Oki. Now, the thing about it, again, like Zosimos, this is also a dagger, which means it can play into Mana Diver, which again is the best class in the game as of right now. So by default, Futsu has to just jump up. Futsu also got a lot of buffs as well, because Futsu's main thing is it plays off of the first skill. Now we got Orologia that is not only skill damage based, which plays into the skill damage stuff of Futsu, but also it reactivates your skill 1, if you call it, and it gives you just another skill 1 press in general, which also plays into this skill here upon using the first slot skill. So Orologia unironically buffs this weapon as well. So if you have Orologia, it raises this weapon even higher as well. So Futsu is much stronger than it was before because of outside means, and because just the fact that it's gotten stuff like this and this instead of the level 7. But Futsu is still, it's just very hard to fit in the grid. It's not something that I would say that you need to have, but if you really play light a lot, it's something that you probably want to have. So Futsu, very good. Futsu now in A tier. Now moving on from A tier to B tier, and I think this is when it's going to start getting a little bit controversial, and just so you know, these are ordered in terms of priority, so it's left to right. So I think Hrunting is better than Ereshkigal. I kind of talked about that, but just so you know, so it's kind of the same even for B tier. Now I'll ignore the elephant in the room, but first we'll go with Ura. Now Ura is good. Ura is good, but Ura is, I would say for the most part, it is a Guild War weapon. It is a Guild War weapon. The thing about Ura is Ura still does max out the amplify normal attack like Ereshkigal. But the thing about Ura is just like I said with Ereshkigal, you can go higher than this now. This isn't as impressive anymore now because you do have amplify normal attack damage special as well. It does boost this triple attack rate, which is good, and it's a boostable thing for like everybody, which is also nice. But the thing about Ura is a lot of bursting in light is not needed. I guess is the best way to say it. Now Ura can still be used for if you want to just OTK something. But the thing about it is light has fallen off the burst train immensely. There's not a lot of times where you need to actively burst as light that is not Guild War related. You can use a different element to do that. Ura is also not like a high level weapon. You don't really bring this to something like Fa Zero or Hexa unless you're just a freak about it. You just don't really bring this weapon like at all. So the main thing is, you know, stuff like boxing events, or, you know, if you want to do a full auto on like Fedial or something like that, you can do that. But the other thing about it is you can just use Mana Diver, and you don't even need to use Futsu to do that. You can just use a Noah Dagger or like the Exo Staff or anything like that. You don't have to use specifically Luchador or Sumaibito bursting with this weapon, right? And for the most part, I would say it. Well, I wouldn't even say for the most part. For the vast majority of stuff, for full auto, you would rather just bring Mana Diver instead of this weapon if you're trying to just full auto, right? So Ura, like I said, it's mostly a Guild War weapon. It does have some other applications, like you can bring it if you're trying to do like a blue chest Agostia comp. Again, you could do it for OTK if you just want to go and hit an enemy. If you just want to attack, you know, I wouldn't even say Celeste because you kind of want to play into the Ogi stuff with Celeste M3. But if you want to hit something like a Fedial, or if you want to hit something like Osiris, you can just go in there and burst with Ura. But a lot of the, like I said, a lot of the bursting in light has just fallen off drastically, and even then you can just use Mana Diver. So Ura in the same sense has fallen off as well. But for something like Guild War, Ura can still be used and very useful when it comes to bursting stuff like 100 and 150, stuff like that. When you actually use that Florence, Mugen, Nihon type of comps, this is still really good, and it works very well with Basara's Katana as well, because that plays into the normal attack play style of Ura as well. So Ura is still really good, but it's a very specialist weapon at this point. It's something that you don't get unless you're really invested in light, and specifically you want to do as much as you can in Guild War. That's where you mostly use Ura. Outside of that, it's not really used nowadays. Next, Hraesvelgr. Now, a lot of people will probably be surprised to see Hraesvelgr in B, but the thing about it, Hraesvelgr's its natural predator is the Mana Diver. It is the Mana Diver. Now, I've talked about for a couple of weapons so far how Mana Diver just makes those weapons jump up a lot. And it's the same thing in water, but I would say it's even more so in water than it is in other elements. The reason why is because water's opus is a staff, which means using your staff opus, you can play Mana Diver by just main handing it. And the main strategy that you can use with Mana Diver water is you can use the Belial key, where when you Ogi on that with that weapon, it gives your entire team double strike behind you in the similar vein as Ereshkigal. This is very accessible because, again, you're always going to have your opus in your grid, and the opus is a staff, which means you can just mainhand it for free. So it makes Mana Diver bursting probably more accessible in water than any other element in the game, which makes Mana Diver even stronger, and it pushes Hraesvelgr out of that burst scenario, because why would you need Hraesvelgr when you can just burst with Mana Diver? And it's for the most part, a lot of times it's actually even stronger too, because the thing about Mana Diver is it can keep consistent damage, and you can continually do it because Mana Diver has a skill that re-ups Ogi every single turn, while also you can abuse things like 000, and you can use stuff like Splitting Spirit to also give you even more Ogis. Not to mention, you also have characters like Paella who get a lot of damage off of double strikes. You get people like Gabriel who get a lot of damage off of double striking and nuking twice. You have a lot of stuff that can play into the Mana Diver water scenario. So you don't really need Hraesvelgr. Now, also the fact of the matter, another really big con about Hraesvelgr is the upkeep and initial acquisition of bullets. Trying to get the bullets, it's not necessarily hard nowadays, but it is incredibly time consuming, and if you ever want to get updated bullets, you will need to farm those in the future as well to keep this weapon relevant. But I will say, even with those bullets, some of those bullets are kind of whack as well. This is someone who has actually farmed bullets. The Bubs bullet, the Bubs bullet does not always hit the debuff, which makes it pretty unreliable. And the Belial bullets are essentially used just for the attack bonus that they get, because they have a higher attack than the Bubs bullets, just on the bullets themselves. So trying to deal with the bullet scenario also makes Hraesvelgr just a big con in general. Hraesvelgr also has, again, this amplified normal attack damage, which again has slightly dropped off a bit because there is now amplified normal attack damage special. So this is not as big of a thing as it used to be before. The constant flurry is still really good on this though. And also now supplement water allies damage. The thing about it before is I said that this was really good because you don't need to use PNS. Well, for one thing, PNS does exist in water now. Water also has access to Wamda spears that can give you supplement on crit, and water plays into crit, so you can kind of avoid even using PNS in the first place. But the thing about it is just the simple fact of this skill plus this skill before were a big boon because there was less stuff to put in the grid in water in general, so this made up for a lot of the stuff. So even though you had weirder grids before with Hraesvelgr, Hraesvelgr kind of made up for that because it gave so many stat bonuses. But now you can actually play into just stronger stuff in your grid, and trying to play into I guess, how do I put this? Hraesvelgr now, if you don't use a lot of the strong weapons in water, like for example like your Exalto or PNS, there's the weapon inventory that you have on water is kind of whack now because they've essentially not gotten weapons that play specifically nice with Hraesvelgr. They have kind of, the weapons that they've gotten now have just given you the stuff that Hraesvelgr gives you. So you're kind of still on the same playing field that you were a year ago with Hraesvelgr, where you're still running stuff like a whole bunch of Wombrellas. You can spam like 3 Exaltos or something to go with it, but like who really wants to do that? It doesn't really, I guess what I'm trying to say is Hraesvelgr hasn't really gotten a lot of bonuses to its playstyle in terms of a grid since like a year ago. Nothing has really changed the grid for it. It hasn't really gotten stronger, which means it's kind of at the same power level that it was a year ago. So when you have stuff like Mana Diver that has gotten significantly stronger than it was a year ago, why not just use Mana Diver instead of Hraesvelgr? That's what I'm trying to say. Hopefully that makes sense. The main thing though is just the fact that Mana Diver, specifically in water, is ridiculously powerful at this moment in time, which makes Hraesvelgr fall off a lot because it costs not only 150 gold moons, but you also need bullets to support it, and you also have to play a gun class in the form of Relic Buster or Soldier, which both are almost always significantly worse than just playing Mana Diver. Hraesvelgr, in my opinion, is also very much a guild war or just optimization weapon, where you may want to have it if you play water a lot, but I would say it is in no way as necessary as it was a year ago. That's pretty much how I feel about Hraesvelgr at this moment in time. Alright, so next, Andromeda. Now, Andromeda, I'm just going to start off by saying Andromeda still has the biggest issue that I think it had before, where Andromeda, if you play a class, specifically Rising Force, but any class that has above 100% charge bar, the way Andromeda works with its double Ogi is that it will take your initial charge bar and Ogi twice if you meet the requirements. After that, if you want to Ogi 3 times in that turn, you need to have specifically 200% charge bar when you press attack, or you need to be able to reach that 200% in the same turn with some type of double strike or triple strike or something like that in order to triple Ogi in that turn. That means, essentially, if you go into a turn and you press attack and your charge bar is at 101% to 199%, you will Ogi twice off of the initial 100% Ogi, and then you will void out the entire rest of your charge bar. So if you were at 199% charge bar and you press attack, you're going to Ogi off the 100%, and then you're going to void and completely lose 99% charge bar, because it just wipes out everything once you Ogi like that, which is still a huge con when you want to play something like Rising Force with this weapon. That is still the biggest con to Andromeda by far. Now, Andromeda did get some changes as well. When MC has 10 or more buffs, also deals bonus earth damage to a foe. When Earth Chain Burst activates, random buff to Earth allies, additional buff based on number of chains. Now, these two are really good. This extra damage that it gets can hit pretty much, it essentially, I would say it doesn't necessarily make up for the fact that you would be losing an extra Ogi if you Ogi between 101 to 199%, because that is still something that's possible. You still can triple Ogi with Andromeda, so it doesn't really make up for the fact that you're losing it. But I will say the damage on this is very comparable to an Ogi. So it doesn't completely make up for the fact that you could lose an Ogi, but it does give you comparable-ish damage to if you had a third Ogi, which is very, very strong, unironically. Also, the buffs that it gets is very good too. This is very strong. Andromeda also, this charge bar gain up specifically, this helps you a lot. Another big thing as well is, since you are going to be voiding a lot of charge bar on this if you're playing something like Rising Force, this can help you and your party, because these are party wide buffs. This can help you and your party consistently Ogi a lot more than you could a year ago on Andromeda, which is really good. And it's even better when you're playing something that doesn't have that issue, aka it can only go to 100% charge bar in general, because you just can Ogi a lot faster than you could before, which is really strong. Andromeda also, another just pro about it in general, Andromeda does offer a lot of healing as well. It's a pretty safe weapon, especially when you add in healing cap, like something like TenkAI staff into your grid as well. It can be a lot of healing because you just Ogi so much and you heal every single time you Ogi, which is really nice. Does give the glory, which is good. Boostable CA buff, very strong there. Just the buffs in general are really good. I would say the biggest issue with Andromeda though is just that there are less good harp classes, and it has to compete against Hrunting. That's the biggest thing. That's the biggest thing about Andromeda, is why would you bring, for the vast majority of content, why would you bring Andromeda? Better yet, why would you play Ogi specific setups when you can just bring Hrunting? And when it comes to buying priority, why would you buy Andromeda over Hrunting? That's the biggest issue, honestly, is that the biggest predator of Andromeda is just Hrunting. Hrunting is just a better weapon in 98% of content. So that's the thing with Andromeda. It is strong. It is definitely stronger than it was a year ago, and it works pretty well in general. I would say it's just a pretty decent weapon. It's just that it has to compete against Hrunting. That's the biggest issue with it, but it's good regardless. Alright, now for C tier. For the first one in C tier, we have Rhomphaia. Now Rhomphaia did get some changes as well. Rhomphaia, this skill now instead activates both at battle start and at the end of any turn allies deal damage 40 more times to the current target on that turn. Sharp attack was changed to sharp attack, so you get this for, like, I think it's like the full turn now. It doesn't just get used if you use like a skill or something. This has been boosted, and when this move, Electrifying Onslaught level, is raised by 2, reset level, and then everyone gets a sharp attack up. So Rhomphaia did get buffed. It is strong, but once again, the biggest predator of Rhomphaia is Mana Diver. And I would also say for Wind in particular, Kengo and Rising Force are just stronger when it comes to high level. The biggest issue with Rhomphaia is it is a lot stronger. It is a lot stronger. But the biggest issue with Rhomphaia is, why would you use Rhomphaia over Mana Diver, Kengo, or Rising Force? Mostly because this is a spear. That's the biggest issue with Rhomphaia. Why would you use a spear class over something like Mana Diver or Kengo or Rising Force? Mana Diver, you can pretty much do everything that Rhomphaia can do when it comes to bursting, or when it comes to full auto. So the only other place would be like high level. And when it comes to high level, why would you use Rhomphaia or a spear class over just bringing Kengo or Rising Force? when both of those, you can use free-to-play weapons as their main hands instead of spending 150 gold moons. So it's just Rhomphaia is in a really weird spot, mostly because it's a spear. If Rhomphaia was like a sword, it would be way better. If Rhomphaia was like a staff, it would be disgusting. But the fact that it's a spear and we still haven't gotten any really good spear classes, it makes it incredibly niche. I would say Rhomphaia is also, for the most part, like a Guild War weapon. But even then, I don't think it's necessarily even that crazy in Guild War either, because you can just use Mana Diver. So Rhomphaia really just has... It's just screwed because it's a spear. They really just need better spear classes in the game. As soon as you get a really good spear class in the game, Rhomphaia will take off. But until that point, it is incredibly hard to recommend this weapon unless you just really are invested in wind and you really just want to mess around with it. Next, Shishio. Now, I got a lot of flack. You guys thought I forgot. I got a lot of flack in the original tier list video for calling Shishio a upgraded Kaneshige. Have we come to the realization that it's just a slightly upgraded Kaneshige yet? Or are we still on some cope? I gotta throw the shade out, because that was by far the biggest complaint I saw in the original video, was that Shishio was the best thing since sliced bread, especially for high level. And it's crazy because a lot of people were just gaslit into the fact that Shishio, at the time, water was the only element that could really solo Hexa, and in the most part you use Shishio for all of those solos. Now you have water out here soloing Hexa with the Berserker class with a Wombrella as the main hand. Pretty much water can solo Hexa with anything you want to do, with any character you want to do. Yeah, you don't need Shishio. Shishio has dropped off even more so than I said before, and honestly, I'm so sorry to anyone that is not highly invested in water that bought Shishio before because they got gaslit into thinking it was the best thing since sliced bread. I'm so sorry for your 150 gold moons, because again, the biggest predator to Shishio is Mana Diver. Again, just like Hraesvelgr, water has accessibility to probably the strongest form of Mana Diver in the game. It is incredibly ridiculous. You can play Mana Diver in high level, and you can play it for burst. And there is almost no reason to bring Shishio for the vast majority of stuff. Even in Guild War, you didn't necessarily need Shishio because you could just burst with something else, specifically Mana Diver. When it comes to high level, like Hexa, you can do whatever you want. For Fa high level, you can just use your Opus as a main hand and play Mana Diver. You do not need to use Shishio for any of that stuff. And when it comes to pretty much any type of full auto where you use water, you will just do the Mana Diver burst with your Opus main hand as well. So Shishio has just dropped completely. Just dropped completely. Now, to give it some credit, it is still pretty strong if you need to play something that's not Mana Diver. If you want to play something like Chrysor, if you want to play something like Kengo, it is still like a safer option. And I would say that Shishio, it doesn't really fall too far behind. The biggest thing with Shishio is that you're probably going to be playing with some type of Ogi comp, and Ogi is just slower than auto attacks plus skill damage, right? So you're just going to be slower. But the thing about it is water also does a ridiculous amount of Ogi damage in its comps, so playing an Ogi comp in water is not the worst thing you could do. So Shishio is still decent, but it's just the fact that you have to compete with Mana Diver, and you have to compete with water Mana Diver, which makes this weapon extremely hard to recommend, especially where, again, if you wanted to play some type of Ogi comp, you could just play with Kaneshige and play Kengo. So you don't really need to have Shishio for anything in the game right now. So that's the reason why Shishio is down in C tier. Now, I will give you all credit this time. I did put Shishio above Higurashi. Now, the thing about Higurashi is say it with me, the biggest predator to Higurashi is Mana Diver. Higurashi was more useful before Fire got Finny Staff. As soon as Fire got Finny Staff, and I would say even more so to a lesser extent the Exo Dagger, until Fire got access to those two weapons and it got access to Mana Diver, Higurashi did see some potential for high level play. You could use it because it does have things like the Wind Switch and the Dodge All, and you could play Ogi, which for the most part is usually like a safer type of setup to use. But the thing about it is now you can just play Mana Diver. You can just play Mana Diver, and even Finny Staff can help you stay alive with its healing. So even then, you don't really need the defense and the survivability of Higurashi. The only time Higurashi really comes into play now is when you're trying to do like some type of solo content. That's like the only time you really use it, unless you're just kind of messing around. Other than that, not really. Higurashi, the crazy thing about it too is Higurashi also did get some changes as well, wherever it is. If 5 or more chains deals 10 hit fire damage to all foes, supplement fire ally CA damage. It's just not enough. It's just not enough. The CA is just not enough to fight against the onslaught that is Mana Diver. Mana Diver just has almost the same amount of survivability for just ridiculous more speed and damage. Higurashi just simply cannot keep up, and because of that, I don't think it is anywhere up here at all. But I do think it's above these two. I do think it's still a decent weapon. It is just far outclassed by Mana Diver and Finny Staff, and to a lesser extent the Exo Dagger. So that's the reason why Higurashi is down here. Now for the last two on the list. Blazing Mistral, D tier. Now Blazing Mistral did get some changes. Blazing Mistral did get it removes 2 buffs on Ogi now. That's the old effect. Now, when main weapon MC only, when a foe uses special attack, and for every 3 skills used by fire allies, 2 hit fire damage to all foes, and it removes 1 buff and it inflicts the stackable debuffs. And then the fire damage dealt when a fire ally removes a foe's buff has had its damage specs increase. Now I'll keep it real. Blazing Mistral is a spear. That's all I gotta say. but Blazing Mistral is a spear. Everything that I said about Rhomphaia before, it pretty much is the exact same thing. Why would you use this over, again, this is fire, you can just use Finny Staff, you can just use Exo Dagger, you can just use Mana Diver. Why would you use this? Now, it does have a little bit of weird stuff where it can do like the removing of buffs. It can help you stack defense. There are some weird full autos I've seen with it for like Super Ultimate Bahamut. I've also seen it used with like Sage in Fall Zero, but those are very extremely niche circumstances. That's something that you only do if you've just got a lot of excess moons, or you really just want to try something different with fire in general. You can do that, but besides that, there is no reason to necessarily buy this weapon. Now that's pretty much it. Honestly, that's pretty much it. It's just not really worth the 150 gold ones at this moment in time. D tier, Murcielago, wherever it is. Murcielago did get changes. I guess let's try and go over those first. So now as MC gains CA damage spec up, boosted damage cap for wind allies with drain effect. When main weapon MC only, when a wind chain burst activates, 6 hit plane damage to a foe based on its current HP. Remove 1 buff, inflict 2 random debuffs, inflict delay drain. If successful, all allies gain charge bar plus. Now the thing about Murcielago, it's a bow. That's all I gotta say. It's a bow. Just think about everything I've said about Rhomphaia and Blazing Mistral, and amplify that times about 5. It's a bow class. Now granted, we did just get Boogeyman, so it has seen a little bit of use. I have seen it in stuff like Fall Zero solos, I've seen it in stuff like Hexa solos, but Murcielago is the most niche of the niche when it comes to these weapons. It is literally just, hey, I really like wind and I have excess moons things and I just want to mess around with something. There is nothing that you need to use Murcielago on right now. Anything that you use Murcielago on right now, you could just use Kengo or Rising Force 4, and you can just play that with a free-to-play main hand and do the exact same type of thing. This weapon wants to do like some weird like Ogi type stuff with a bow, but you can just play Ogi with a different class. It is not really worth it to use this weapon whatsoever unless you just really want to mess around with it. And you really want to play around with Boogeyman or like some Kengo stuff with the bow. It is just too niche to use, and honestly, even if we had a really good bow class, I still don't know if it would really jump ahead because its skills just really aren't that crazy of anything, to be honest. They really aren't. And Ogi is just kind of slow in general. So it's just Murcielago. It's the most niche of the niche. It's the most niche of the niche. Only get this if you really have nothing else better to spend your moons on, and you really like wind. That is pretty much the reason why you get Murcielago. So, that being said, this is the Illustrious weapon tier list / priority list. This is how I feel as of right now, May 2025. I may update this. This may be like a yearly thing until we get like another weapon tier, like 200 gold moon weapons or something, and then I'll just kind of stop caring about them. But until then, you know, this is how I feel a year later just about these weapons just in general. So like I said, I didn't want to make this one super long-winded. If you want to see more in-depth stuff about some of these weapons, I'll put the original tier list in the description, and I'll put the changes video when I saw the initial changes in the description as well. But for the most part, I would say when it comes to in-depth analysis, outside of just how much some of these weapons are used, those initial videos, kind of already describe it, which is why I didn't want to go into super amounts of detail in this video. I kind of just wanted to talk about how I would go about buying these if you don't have them already. Now, I will also say before I leave, a lot of these, outside of probably Hrunting and Ereshkigal, most of these are primal weapons. I will also say that. A lot of these weapons you don't really use in Magna. So I would not necessarily go down and just buy these weapons just to buy them if they're higher on the priority list if you are Magna. Pretty much everything that is outside of S tier is more of an optimization standpoint, and they can make your life better even in Magna, but they are mostly aimed at a primal audience. I will say that before I leave. But Hrunting and Ereshkigal, you can make a ridiculous amount of use out of them even in Magna as well. So that's how I'll end this. Thanks for watching. Thanks for the support as always, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.